All right, hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Eurosnob podcast. I know it's been a little while, but my name is Alex John, and today I'm joined by my bud Zach Taylor. And Zach, how you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No, of course. And I know it's been a little while since we've been on. Just crazy stuff with the season starting, but also work and all that sort of stuff. But we thought this would be a good time to get some new content out there with the international break and a chance to kind of regroup. Although I will say it's the worst timed international break of all time because you're literally just getting into the rhythm of a season. And then 4 weeks later, you have to take a break. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but that always pisses me off timing wise.
Well, I mean, for me, we just got these 2 wins on the trot, and right when we're getting a little bit of, positive motion, positive, I don't know, form, yeah, we go into a 2 week break or an interlull.
Exactly. And it feels like you kind of lose that momentum. But obviously, it's been kind of an eventful past month for Arsenal. And, we're going to start with Arsenal talk, and then we'll get to a little bit of a Premier League recap in terms of the major storylines. And Lord knows there's a bunch of them. But, let's just get right into it. I mean, season started, that game against City. And I know we kind of talked before that game as to our expectations. I think you were a little bit more optimistic than me, if I remember correctly. I think you might have predicted a win. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I was trying to sneak one in there, but
did that game really kind of play out as you expected it to? I mean, to be honest, I didn't go into that with tons of expectation other than I thought we would create chances. And I think maybe that was my only disappointment from that game, and just that we looked so toothless in attack,
Yeah, that's the part of the expectation that I went with it. I knew Arsenal was gonna Arsenal it, and let those typical goals go in. I was hoping for a better response than we got, but it's what it is.
Yeah, and again, that's such a tough game to open the season with. I mean, it's probably your second hardest game other than going to Man City. And, I think maybe our hope was, we'll get these guys with World Cup hangover. But to be quite honest, when you can bring guys like Bernardo Silva and Sane and all of them into the lineup and not really miss a beat, I think it just kind of showed the gap that there is to those top teams and how much work there is for Emery to do. So to be honest, I don't think it serves tons of purpose to look into that game so much in terms of assessing performances or coaching. I think the Chelsea game kind of provided a little bit more in that sense. And, they jumped on us early. And my initial feeling in that Chelsea game was, oh boy, we're going to get romped. Here we go again to Stamford Bridge and we're going to come home with the loss. We were down 2-0 within, I think, about 30, 35 minutes, something like that. What was your kind of feeling with that game as opposed to the City game and how you approached it as a fan even?
So watching the Chelsea game, I mean, you hit it nail on the head. When Morata scored that second goal, I think it was about the 21st minute. It was just, and it was against Mustafi, our favorite center back. But I don't know. It was almost expected, a little bit of a letdown. I just felt like it was going to be one of those 3, 4, 5-0 games. Just the way, Pedro scored a good goal, but Morata, just the way he toyed with Mustafi and scored. I was delighted to see Mkhitaryan, pull one back before the half. Of course, with the Iwobi as well, but I don't know. It played out as to be expected versus Chelsea. They're more of our boo-boo club than anybody else. We always play down against them, always.
Yeah, and I think what was interesting about that game, though, is to the club's credit and to the players' credit, when they went 2-0 up, I thought we were going to get romped. I really did. Like you said, I thought it might be 3, 4, 5. Once Mkhitaryan hit his chance to make it 2-1, I kind of had some hope, and then all of a sudden it was 2-2. But I think the most frustrating part of that game, but also maybe what gave me a little bit of solace, was that we missed so many clear-cut chances. I don't think I've ever seen Aubameyang miss that many chances. I think Mkhitaryan missed a few as well. And conceivably, even though we went into halftime at 2-2, it probably could have been 3-2 or 4-2 Arsenal. I mean, when you were watching that, I'm assuming you had the same reaction as I did. Just how are we missing these chances? This is Chelsea. You can't afford to give away this many opportunities.
Well, when you play a top team like that, just like you said, I mean, you're only going to get so many opportunities. You have to put them away. I mean, and when you spend, 50 million a piece on two strikers like Lacazette and Aubameyang throughout the game, I mean, you're expecting them to put them away. I know they didn't, play the entire time together, but I mean, you're expecting them to put them away, and when they don't, it's wanting to pull your hair out the entire time, because it's almost like Sunday League could score some of these goals.
Yeah, I think Aubameyang missed a couple. I mean, for what most professionals would call fairly easy chances, and the thing that I felt good about at least was that we were creating those chances, and sometimes when we go away to these big grounds, we don't necessarily even create tons of chances, but we were able to carve Chelsea open. And I think at 2-2, I felt like the game was there to be had. I thought actually Emery made a good step bringing Torreira on at halftime, and then he eventually brought Lacazette on as well. Unfortunately, Lacazette had a bad giveaway that kind of led to that third goal, but I mean, with that game, I was conflicted because I think Chelsea is going to really improve throughout the season. So I feel like that was a game where we could have at least stolen a draw, if not a win. But at the same time, maybe the manner of the performance encouraged me. I feel like when we've gone to Stamford Bridge under Arsene Wenger in previous seasons, there was almost a resignation that we were going to lose. I don't know if you felt that way.
Yeah, the last 6 or 7 years, it was, especially at Stamford Bridge, even sometimes at home, you almost felt like you were going to lose. Couple of points of reply there. I mean, at this point, what does Lucas Torreira have to do to make the starting 11? I really, more than Xhaka giving the ball away, more than Mustafi being Mustafi, what does Torreira have to do to start? I mean, some people will say he was at fault, for the Marcus Alonso goal, kind of letting him go. But I mean, I don't know. I'm ready for him to start. Every time he comes on the field, our midfield plays better. And secondly, people want to blame. I've read several things on Twitter, several blogs saying Lacazette shouldn't have gave the ball away. But think about it like this: when Lacazette gives the ball away, there's 9 people behind him. So it's not like it was just his fault.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that can sort of be applied to Granit Xhaka as well, because Xhaka, for all of his positive qualities, and we'll get into these in a little bit, but for all of his positive qualities, he does have 1 or 2 bad giveaways a game. But in the spots we lose them, we usually still should have time to recover. We should still have enough men behind the ball. Against Chelsea, I give Torreira a little bit of a pass just because I don't think you see those types of runs in Serie A when you have a left fullback literally cutting into the box. I don't think you see such aggressive fullback play, and maybe he just kind of lost sight of that. Lacazette, like you said, I don't think you necessarily rely on, I don't think you necessarily rely on 7 or 8 guys not doing their job even after you've given the ball away. So, it was kind of a combination of factors that led to that giveaway and that goal. And I kind of had a bitter taste in my mouth. And then, we did finally pick up a win against West Ham the following weekend. But to me, the performance against West Ham was arguably less encouraging than the Chelsea performance, if that makes some sense, just in terms of not necessarily being able to control midfield and giving away so many clear-cut chances. I mean, I know Arnautovic probably had 3 or 4 chances to get on the score sheet that he didn't take advantage of.
That was the game that Lacazette didn't start as well.
Yeah, he came off the bench on that one, yeah.
And if you think, I do agree with you regarding we played worse in the first half than we did versus Chelsea. It was an ugly, ugly game. Arnautovic should have scored more. Even though that was an excellent shot that he put away. When Lacazette came onto the field, it was just a completely different ball game. I think it took him a year and an injury to get used to it, but I really think he's learned that maybe it's Unai Emery, maybe it's just a year in the league, but he's learned how to be a little bit more sturdy on the ball, how to be a little bit more ready for Premier League play. And when he came onto the field, everything absolutely changed. And obviously, from there, it wasn't on goal, but I mean, taking the ball down off the chest, turning around and putting it back into a dangerous area. Aubameyang could have just hit it in really easily, but we'll take the own goal.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned his hold-up play, because we saw that again against Cardiff when he finally did start a game. it's like you said, his hold up play has really, really developed over the past year. I think it does for strikers, especially someone with Lacazette's build. It probably does take a little bit, excuse me, a little bit of time to develop that physical strength, or at least the anticipation of the physical contact you're going to have. And now I feel like he's much more advanced in terms of holding up the ball than Aubameyang. And I think maybe that's where him playing as a number 9 can be a little bit more advantageous than playing Aubameyang there. Now you lose a little bit of the pace to go behind defenders, but his one-touch game has really improved. I think his link-up play has improved. I think he's made a pretty clear case for him to start, and I think there's such an understanding with him and Aubameyang that I think you have to figure out a way to get them on the pitch together. Now, do you push Aubameyang wide left? Yeah, it does limit Aubameyang to some extent. It doesn't sound like that Emery is ready to play just 2 up top in a flat 4-4-2 or something like that. He's kind of mentioned wanting to have numbers in midfield. So, I mean, how do you having seen the Cardiff game especially and how they linked up for Aubameyang's goal, especially when Lacazette kind of had that back heel to set him up, how do you kind of fit those guys in while at the same time maybe providing that midfield security that Emery seems to be looking for?
Yeah, I don't think Unai Emery will go to 2 at the top until we can really solidify the midfield and the defense with the high press system he wants and playing it out of the back. I don't think we'll get the best out of Alba until then. Just like you said, when you push him out to the left, he's not the type of player to take somebody on. That's just not part of his game. I even pulled up some videos of before he was even at Dortmund when he was almost always on the wing, and he was always just a speedster more than trying to beat somebody. He's the finished product or the finisher, not the creator. So putting him out on the left is not getting the best out of him at all. I don't know what it's going to take. I really think Emery needs to get the midfield combination correct. For me, I couldn't even tell you how I would set it up from a coaching perspective between Ramsey, Xhaka, and Torreira, but it's definitely a coach's conundrum there.
Yeah, and the thing is, you also have to figure out where to fit Ozil. And, I think my thinking at the beginning of the season was, we'll just play a flat 4-3-3, Ramsey, Xhaka, Torreira, and then Ozil is part of the front 3. But I think I kind of underestimated how we lack so much width with that formation. And so you almost rely exclusively on your fullbacks to provide the width, which is fine, except, playing this high line, it also means you leave tons of space behind. So in the situations where Bellerin has to push forward, he's not necessarily getting the cover because he's got an attacking mid playing ahead of him rather than a more traditional winger with the pace to track back. And I think we saw that for the first goal against Chelsea, if you remember, when Bellerin kind of, he tracked Willian inside for some reason. I don't know why. And then Mkhitaryan was a little slow to react, and Marcos Alonso just sped past him for the goal to set up the goal for Pedro. But, it does provide a conundrum for Unai Emery because, yes, you want the midfield solidity, but at the same time, if you have 2 strikers of that ability, I feel like you have to figure out a way to get the best out of both of them because it looks like they enjoy playing together. But at the same time, if you're Aubameyang and you were a superstar striker at Dortmund, and then you're being pushed out to the left, how do you feel about that? And you kind of being used to accommodate another player rather than having a team kind of built to your strengths.
I think, it's the French connection, obviously, between Lacazette and Aubameyang. There is definitely a connection between the 2 of them, seeing that with Lacazette's assist to them versus Cardiff. But the thing is, we've got 2 or 3 different kind of you have to put them in situations. We've got Aubameyang and Lacazette. For one, you've got to find a place for Ozil. He's the highest paid, highest profile player on the team, who's going through a bit of a personal battle. I think this season's going to be rough for him. But even still, you got to find a place for him, and putting him out on the right wing. Yeah, he can do a job versus a mid-table or lower-table team, but he's not the type of winger that you would want against any top-level team. And the third one, it's what two midfielders are going to be the base. We've got three center midfielders in two positions. So, I mean, we've got three different, how are we going to fit them in situations that Emery just needs to iron out. And I think it's just going to be a curse of somebody's going to get the axe at the end, either in January or at the end of the season. But there's going to be, I forget what the phrasing that I read about, but there's going to be somebody that gets the axe at the end of the season just because they're not fitting into what Emery wants. And that's just part of a change in leadership.
Yeah, and you mentioned the midfield too, and that in itself has been really interesting to watch because, like you, I've been super frustrated that Lucas Torreira hasn't been starting because for me, when you spend 30 million on a player, yes, I understand that he had the World Cup, but he only got to the quarterfinals. You know, he didn't play that extra week, for the semis and the final. So
And he didn't even play every game.
exactly. So I felt like he, at the very least, maybe the first two games I understand, but then by West Ham, I feel like he should have been in. And it's tough because I think Guendouzi's been very impressive. He's been so far beyond what I expected of him in terms of his composure on the ball and his passing range and his ability to kind of get nasty, which I like. But I almost wonder if the balance of a Xhaka Torreira midfield works better in terms of their strengths. In other words, I think Guendouzi might be the better overall talent as compared to Xhaka, but I think Xhaka maybe complements Torreira more, where Torreira can just sit and break up play, which then allows Xhaka to do what he does and dictate play and spread the ball around without necessarily having the defensive responsibility. But I mean, it's also super harsh on Guendouzi to bench him after the way he started the season. I think he got awarded Arsenal's Player of the Month for August, right?
He did indeed get that award, but at the same time, he's got to understand that he's 19. He's not going to be the guy this year, and I don't think. Although I think there's a lot of potential in him, far more than in Xhaka. I don't think he's Mr. Right now. At the same time, I'm wondering what did Arsene Wenger and now Unai Emery see in Granit Xhaka's play that makes him so undroppable? He's got 3 yellow cards in 4 games. He's going to be suspended before the next international break for yellow card accumulation. And he's got this magical array of passing. It's he can stop the ball on a dime 60 yards down the field. It's amazing. But he's so unaware at the same time in the build-up, when the ball is at his feet, in defense. It's like he's in his own little world, and I don't understand why he is so undroppable.
Yeah, I think with him, and I'll admit I've been a Xhaka fan since we signed him, just because I've always liked that ability to dictate a game, and I think in most games he can serve that purpose. My frustration with him is that he doesn't seem to have developed any sort of awareness of the game speed. I think sometimes he thinks he has way more time than he has. There are too many times where the ball gets caught in his feet and then, pressed away from him, and then he commits a foul. And then
exactly. It's like when you see him looking up down the field for that diagonal ball, especially the type of diagonal ball that led to Cardiff's first goal that everybody's on him for, it's almost like when you see somebody, it's like either he's not hearing it, or no one on the ground or in the stands is telling him, man on, someone's coming. Or like I said, he just doesn't even hear it, because I don't understand his lack of awareness.
Yeah, and I think to that point about lack of awareness too, the ball to Bellerin, I mean, that's just not a ball you play at that moment. I understand what he saw, but I think playing that type of ball with all the space that Bellerin left behind him was just such a risky play. I mean, I will say, I forget who it was, but one of the good stats guys on Twitter talked about Xhaka's passing ability and kind of how it led to a higher creation of chances, and his passing quality, and the fact that he plays through the line so much and our buildup does suffer when he's not in. I think maybe that's the concern when you have a Guendouzi Torreira or even a Ramsey Torreira pivot, is you don't have someone who's going to play between the lines. I think Torreira is a good passer. I think, he's very quick on the ball. He makes quick decisions, but he's maybe not that guy who's going to play a 15-yard pass between the lines to an attacking mid. So it's tough because at some point, And I think it's already happening. And I heard this mentioned. It might have been on the Arts blog that Jack is just becoming one of those guys where the fan opinion has changed on him, and he might not be able to reverse it to where even if he does make only one or two mistakes a game, those are going to be the things that stick out. But a lot of that is his own fault, to be honest. So it's hard to have too much sympathy for him in that instance. But I do think, and I'd love to hear your take on this as well, but I do think that Jaka Torreira is probably what we're going to see after the international break. I don't know what's our game after the international break. Actually, I don't even know. I think it's Everton. Is that right?
It looks like Newcastle on the 15th.
That's right, Newcastle away. So that's a tough one. Then we've got the Europa League after that, and then Everton. So now the games will start coming pretty thick and fast. And I just wonder, is this finally when you pick your first choice midfield?
I would hope so. I really would hope so. I mean, I feel like when the Europa League starts, FC Vorskla, I'm not sure. I've never heard of them. I don't want to disparage them. I've just never heard the name. I feel like we're going to get a lot of rotation in that game. I hope to see Bernd Leno in that game. But, yeah, you would think after the international break, or at least after the first Europa League game, we're going to see our best choice. After 5 or 6 games, Emery should know who the best choice is for what he wants to do. In regards to Xhaka, yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to agree with James from Gunner Blog. It's to the point where he can score a goal, have 85% passing accuracy, and that one or two thing he does wrong is what everybody's going to remember about him. And he's built that reputation himself. Now, with the pass versus Cardiff, I don't even really mind the pass because it could have killed the game off right there. But I mind how the pass was taken. If you're going to play that ball at that point of the game, from that point of the field, you have to play it so diagonal that Bellerin's got to run 20 yards to get to it. You have to play it further upfield than, trying to curve it right to his feet at, 55, 60 yards away. That ball has got to be further down the field. Because like I said, I don't mind the idea. It's a good idea because Bellerin would have been in, but it's got to be further ahead.
It's almost like a quarterback wide receiver situation where you want to lead your receiver rather than throw it to a spot in most instances.
Exactly.
And I think at his age, I mean, that's just something he really has to know. And I think at the rate Guendouzi's progressing, it's kind of put up or shut up time for Jack. I think he's got to show something in these next 5-10 games. And, in terms of showing something, I think another position on the field that you and I think we both share a pretty similar opinion is the goalkeeper position, and the constant heart palpitations that Petr Cech playing from the back is causing not just us, but literally even people in the media, pundits, journalists, fans of other teams. I think they all see the issues with playing this type of style of building from the back with a 36-year-old goalkeeper that has never done it before. And I know you've been waiting to get on this Leno train, so I'm going to let you run with it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can't believe it. It's kind of a situation of the same as Torreira. What does Bernd Leno have to do to start? Watching a lot of Arsenal's own media production in terms of training and everything, he looks fit the part. Highlight videos from Leverkusen, he looks very, very much exactly what Emery wants. If you think of the pass that Petr Cech almost put into his own net, the pass, I mean, I think he was looking at Guendouzi behind them, but completely looked past Arthur there right at the top of the D. It should have been down 1-0 from that very point. I mean, every time we pass the ball back to him, I'm holding my breath. And I don't think that our luck is going to last all season. We haven't given up a goal specifically due to a Cech error yet, but we've come so close that we cannot continue to rely on hope and prayer. I also don't believe, Socrates did him a lot of justice with the pass back. It was kind of light, and I really think that combination, more than just Socrates and Mustafi, but Socrates, Mustafi, and Petr Cech have to all get it together. I don't know if it's a language barrier or just new guy on the team, but there's obviously a lack of communication every game. And it's very much, worrying. But I do think on the flip side, when we get back from the international break, Petr Cech will start versus Newcastle. Obviously, Bernd Leno will come in the cup. And if he does really well, even if it's against a minnow team, if he does really well and executes everything perfectly, I mean, how can Unai Emery say no to him?
Yeah, that's my only hope at this point, is that when Leno gets his chance, that he'll really show something. And it's kind of been an interesting dilemma with Leno, because you bought him for 22 million, and I think obviously you saw the goalkeeper market this summer. You saw Kepa go for what, 70, 80 million. You saw Allison go for 60 or 70, whatever it was. So those top end goalkeepers were going for significantly higher than Leno, which means maybe in terms of market value, Leno's not a star. But I think for a club with the limited budget like Arsenal have this summer, if you're going to spend 20 plus million on any player, regardless of position, that guy better be ready to start. So if Emery doesn't see him ready to start, then that's an issue with the scouting department. That's a Sven Mislintat issue. Now, if Emery just genuinely prefers Czech after having seen him, and if Leno's doing everything he's supposed to do in training, that's a little more worrying to me. If they're both performing at the same level in training, but Emery knows that this is the style he wants to play and he's still choosing Czech, that is alarming to me, because I think everyone can see the limitations. And what some people have said is, well, Czech has all of this experience and this and that. Bernd Leno's played over, I think someone said 250 games in the Bundesliga.
Yeah, he's not some inexperienced young kid.
Exactly. So just to assume that, oh, he needs all this time to adjust, and this and that. I think goalkeeping's too much. Obviously, the physicality might change, but I don't see the need for a betting period for a goalkeeper, because you've seen Liverpool put Allison right in, Chelsea put Kepa right in. I don't know why you would necessarily take such a cautious approach with Leno, unless, and this is kind of not a conspiracy theory, but I almost feel like Unai Emery is giving Czech enough rope to hang himself with. In other words, he's putting him out there and kind of putting his flaws on display and saying, look, this is a good goalkeeper, but he's not good enough for what I'm doing. And now that, which sucks for Czech. And again, there might be nothing to that, but it sucks for Czech, because I think he's not a bad goalkeeper. Obviously he's a legend, but at the same time, fans are just seeing this part of him and just wondering, like, what the fuck is going on? You know what I mean?
I mean, he's deteriorating fast. When we played against him when he was at Chelsea, he was world class then. And we signed him when he was at the end of that world class status, and he's not that anymore. And it kind of leads you to believe if exactly what you're saying, if they're training just as well, in the training sessions at the same level, how bad of a goalkeeper must Bernd Leno be? If he's that much better with his feet, how much bad of his goalkeeping skills or decision-making skills must he be to be worse than what we've seen from Petr Cech? Maybe Unai Emery is wanting to do some kind of a trial and error or a trial by fire with Petr Cech, and he just wants him to prove himself. But I think he's proven through 4 games that this is too much for him to handle with his skill set, with his age and athleticism. I think it's too much. And secondly, I agree with you when it comes to getting ready for the Premier League. I understand a midfielder needs time to get used to the pace of the Premier League. A striker needs time to get used to the roughness and pace of the defenders in the Premier League. But a goalkeeper is a goalkeeper. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Stop the shots. Kepa went straight in. Ederson, when he went to City, went straight in. Allison went straight in. I mean, it's a goalkeeper. It's a pretty easy position. Not easy, but you don't need to be warmed up to the position. You know your job from the start. So it is worrying that we spent that much money on Bernd Leno, and he's still not getting a start. Now, we might be overthinking. It's only 4 games in. We signed him to a big contract. He's obviously the future. But at the same time, we've, as Arsenal fans have been hearing the future this guy's the future, that guy's the future forever. And the majority of these future players have not panned out to be future. Thinking Theo Walcott, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Serge Gnabry, Zalala. I mean, there's so many of them that I could name off that it's just they're supposed to be the next big thing, but they're not. So I'm ready for him to be given his chance to prove himself because he's no slouch. He's a great shot stopper, I think.
Yeah, and I think, I didn't watch tons of Bundesliga, but when I've seen him, I always thought he was good with his feet, good shot stopper. Maybe not the best in terms of dealing with crosses, and he has the occasional lapse in concentration. But I think even if you have a mistake from him, I think I'm willing to take the mistakes with his upside, because I think at least with him, the potential to be a top keeper is there, because he's 26, which is still fairly young for a goalkeeper, but he still he has tons of experience. With Czech at 36, his reflexes aren't going to get any faster. He's not going to become a better passer all of a sudden. I think you have to take your lumps with Leno this season to build towards the next 5 or 6 years, because presumably he's going to be your guy unless he just turns out to be a complete disaster. But to outlay that much money on a goalkeeper and then be so cautious just doesn't make sense to me at this point, at least. Now, I'll give Leno credit that he said something to the effect of like, oh, I know my chance will come. I signed a long-term contract. So I think he's approaching it the right way. But I think for a team that is really trying to build an identity, I think hanging on to Czech and hoping that he somehow becomes this sweeper keeper that seems to be all the rage now is kind of naive. And given our other defensive frailties, I think having someone back there who would have a little composure on the ball would alleviate a lot of our issues. And just kind of wrapping up the Arsenal talk before we get into the Premier League talk, the one of the guys who's been getting a lot of flack, and I feel unfairly so. I mean, I've criticized him defensively at times, but in rewatching a lot of the games and his output as an attacker is Hector Bellerin, and I'd be curious to get your take on Bellerin. So many of our attacking chances have come down his right side, and he's usually been playing with either Mkhitaryan or Ozil in front of him. So he's more or less been manning the right side on his own. I mean, defensively, I think he's definitely had some issues, but as an attacker, I think he's been a great outlet, and he's learned to play that little cutback ball to either a striker or a midfielder making a late run. But what's kind of been your takeaway from Bellerin this season? Because I've seen a lot of Arsenal fans being a little bit critical of him.
For me, he's been very, very hit or miss. He has learned, it seems, to be a better crosser of the ball. It's definitely got to be something that the training staff and Unai Emery are trying to implement with this cutback ball, because it's not necessarily crossing, and it's not just from Bellerin. It's from, Ramsey had, driving to the baseline, Lacazette turning around to get that own goal. The cutback is definitely a tactic that they have to be implementing. But he's learned it really well. I mean, if you think of the ball he played over to Welbeck, who scored it in acres of space, left foot, the way he did, it's a lot to like. At the same time, I miss the old Hector before he became such a social media and fashion or, first team icon that he is. I miss him when he was still a young lad, just breaking into the team, because I feel like his defensive contribution was more than it is now. With that being said, we played Chelsea once in the preseason, once in the league, and both times he was absolutely turned inside out, first by a teenager and secondly by a combination of the attacking front of Chelsea and really Marcus Alonso. I think since that foul, the concussion that he got in the game when Marcus Alonso scored, I don't want to say that Hector Bellerin's scared of him, but there's definitely a little bit of a unwillingness to take him on, unwillingness to play as hard as he possibly could.
Yeah, it's tough. I do wonder how much that incident kind of laid on his mind just in general. I mean, I don't think his pace has been what it was when he first kind of broke through, and again, that could be injuries as well. I mean, I'm glad to see his attacking output, and so that's kind of why I've been a little bit higher on him this season than most, because I just think his attacking numbers have been great. The thing with him too is I think he attracts a lot of criticism from kind of the old stodgy Arsenal fans because of all the hair pick, his hair and all his pictures. I mean, it's like the Paul Pogba effect. Like a lot of old fashioned fans get all pissy about that sort of stuff. And I mean, that's just not a reason to criticize a player. I think the fact that he's an articulate guy with good fashion sense, for the most part, I mean, I'm not going to ever hold that against him. But I think it's interesting because, you do have Lichtsteiner on the bench. And so I think that's going to give you some options in terms of rotating for Europe or even for easier Premier League games. I wouldn't mind seeing Lichtsteiner get a couple games just to keep him on his toes, keep Hector fresh. And then we'll see what happens from there. But I think the problem is he's been asked to carry so much of the attacking load that he's basically our primary source of width, if you think about it, because Monreal really hasn't been getting forward. I know he scored a goal against West Ham, but for the most part, obviously, I think he's 32 or 33. So Monreal is not necessarily someone who's going to get up and down the flanks to the extent that Bellerin can.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on a couple things there. I cannot wait till Lichtsteiner gets a start. I was really impressed with him when I seen him come on. For me, his experience, whatever he may be lacking physically, his experience makes up for it. But, in terms of Bellerin getting any kind of slack from becoming who he has became, I think it leads to this. I mean, I don't know what the highest level you played, Alex, but there's always that guy on the team that has the flashiest new cleats and wears their socks this way and, this and that. There's always that guy. And if you're going to be that guy, if you're going to be Pogba with his haircuts, if you're going to be Balotelli, if you're going to be that guy, you have to have more output on the field. Because if you're going to draw so much attention to yourself off the field, your performance has to make up for it. And that's not to say that he's not, performing well this season. If I had to grade him on his first 4 games, I'd say probably 7.8 to an 8.
Yeah,
He's had a really strong season to start. But like I said, if you're going to be this fashion guy and wear all the crazy clothes, I mean, you saw his Instagram today. I think you shared it to me. I mean, if you're going to be that guy, you have to perform on the field, because then you turn into a flashy guy that isn't performing, and you're just known for being the flashy guy like Balotelli. And where is he now?
But should he be, not punished. I don't want to say punished, but should he be held to a different standard just for that reason? I mean, ultimately, what he's doing off the pitch, I don't feel like it influences his on the field play. Now, you could talk about other things like the veganism and some of his more new age training, in terms of staying in shape. But I mean, the clothes and all that for me, I mean, I'm more than okay with players kind of having their own identity off the pitch. I will say on the pitch, I feel like his attitude has always been great, and he's always been accountable. And I think sometimes we forget he's only 22 or 23. And I think, there's still a lot to see from him, which is why I think having a guy like Lichtsteiner should be really beneficial, just in terms of learning maybe to become a little bit more, I don't want to say nasty, but just maybe having that tactical nous, that sometimes I think we lack. And I think that's true for a lot of guys on the team too, just maybe learning to be a little bit more gritty at times.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You can't necessarily hold it against him, but it becomes a talking point. I mean, if you look at it, Nacho Monreal doesn't do that, and he's a top performer. I mean, it all adds up. So, I mean, I wouldn't say you judge him in a negative way because of that. But again, in my opinion, a lot of being successful as a footballer, it comes from a lot of just on the field, or a lot more than just on the field. I mean, obviously the guy's not lacking any kind of confidence dressing the way he does, but if he's more distracted by his off-field antics than he is, and I don't even want to say antics, but just off-field things, then he is concentrating on becoming a better him, it leads more of those old school type fans to, want to judge him a little bit more harshly. I don't judge him that harshly on it, but I think it's taken his focus away a little bit from what he could have developed into over the last 2 years.
I will say, I think another reason that maybe he's attracted more criticism, and And I said this on Twitter, but if you remember last year, he came out in I think he did like a talk at Oxford or something like that, or one of those universities, and he mentioned Arsenal Fan TV and how detrimental it can be. And pretty soon after that, you saw this almost a campaign from all these idiots on Arsenal Fan TV. You know, like the regulars, like DT and Claude and all those morons, and they started criticizing him even more harshly for performances. And, you know, I think almost using him as a scapegoat, like, hey, you know, you said this about us, so we're going to start blaming you. And then the channel starts getting more views for those hits, and fans started, you know, the fans who find those types of people interesting, you know, started to buy into it. So I think he's kind of been a product of, or a victim of that to some extent. But you know, we'll see. I think after the international break, I'm sure Lichtsteiner will kind of start to get rotated in as well when the Europa games start coming quick and fast. But I know we're kind of running low on time, and I wanted to get into just general takeaways from the league table so far. You know, the Premier League as a whole. I mean, we've got Liverpool, Chelsea, and Watford top of the table, 4 out of 4. Then Man City on 10 points, Tottenham at 9. And then, you know, Bournemouth, Everton, Leicester, Arsenal, United round out the top 10 and then Wolves, Southampton, Fulham, Brighton, Palace, Cardiff, Huddersfield, Newcastle, Burnley, and West Ham with a grand total of 0 points. So just at least for the top of the table, what have kind of been your takeaways from, you know, Liverpool, from Chelsea? And do you think those teams can mount a serious title challenge to City?
I think Liverpool can. I don't think Chelsea has it in the squad. I really don't, not with a new coach. I'd love to say that I'd be, you know, I'm incredibly impressed with Watford. I mean, 4 wins out of 4, but only one of those games came against top teams. I mean, and that was Tottenham Hotspur.
So not even a top team.
Right. But I mean, hey, all credit to them. They've won 4, we've won 2, so you can't really take it away from them. But they played Tottenham at home. They beat them 2-1. Aside from that, they beat Palace, Burnley, and Brighton, all of which are, you know, outside the top 10. So, I mean, there's a little taking that with a grain of salt. That being said, Manchester City was unlucky to be drawn again, or to get that draw, or they would be 4 from 4 as well. I don't know. I think Chelsea falls out pretty quickly. I don't think they've had an incredibly difficult start to the season either, with their first 4 games. So I don't think they'll be able to mount as much of a challenge. In regards for the rest of the table, you know, Tottenham will probably get into the top 4. Arsenal, I'm happy that they're above Manchester United, you know, obviously. And the one that I've been surprised that hasn't adapted very well has been Wolves. I was really expecting a lot more from them. I mean, I know they had a decently tough start to the season, but I was really expecting a lot more from them than what we've seen. When you watch them, you can definitely see the talent on display, you know, but at the same time, their first 4 games have been all against top 10, other than West Ham, top 10 teams, you know, with Man City, Leicester, and Everton. So they haven't had a too terrible of a start. And that's kind of the same thing with Arsenal. You know, Arsenal starts with Manchester City at home, Chelsea away. The good news is we don't have to play them for another 4 months at least. I haven't even looked at any of the fixtures after Boxing Day, but, you know, you get those games out of the way early. You know, yeah, of course, I would have wanted at least 3 points from those 2 games, but you get them out of the way early, and then we can hit the meat of the Premier League with a little bit more gilt edge to us. You know, we've already been thumped twice by top opponents, so we know what we need to do, and we're starting to learn to play together even more. But going back to the Premier League, I mean, table, you know, going back to your question, I think the only ones that can really legitimately challenge Manchester City is going to be Liverpool. Arsenal maybe in a couple of years. United is absolute dumpster fire, just as Ian and I predicted it would be. Hashtag third year Mourinho. But yeah, no, I mean, I only think the team I think will challenge them at all is going to be Liverpool.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how Liverpool handles the Champions League as well, because they got a pretty decently tough draw. I think they got PSG and Napoli, and I forget who the third team was, but they got a pretty tough draw, and they don't have a particularly deep squad. So I'm curious to see how they manage that. I will say their attack, when they're in full attack, it's very fun to watch, and the way they play is a lot of fun, and they score lots of goals. I still think there's vulnerability in defensively. I know Van Dijk was a pretty expensive buy, but I still think that there's space that you can find in their defense. I do think City are going to click it into gear. I saw that game against Wolves, and actually that was a lot of fun because I think Wolves at least tried to play with them, and they probably deserved at least to get that draw. But I think it is going to be City Liverpool. I will say Spurs unfortunately do look pretty good, although they followed up their United win with a Watford loss, so it's kind of classic Spurs where they have great moments and then they give it away. They classic lose that Spurs. Momentum. It is classic Spurs, but I think we talked about in the previous episode. United are kind of trending in the way we all thought they would. With Mourinho and all his press conference snipes and talking about respect, and are you surprised that has happened as quickly as it has this season? I thought he'd make it a couple more weeks, to be honest with you, before he melted down.
Yes, slightly surprised, but not really at the same time. When it started out with the Martial going home for the birth of his child thing, I kind of knew it was starting early. So it's not super surprising that Mourinho wants us respect. I've got 3 trophies. That's the most as anybody combined, but I've seen nobody else has, even been there. Alex Ferguson's gone, Wenger's gone. All the longtime servers are gone. So
notice that he waited for Wenger to retire before he said all that.
Right. Going back to Spurs though, in terms of their Champions League group, look them up here. First game, Inter Milan away, Barcelona at home, PSV Eindhoven away. That's a tough group. They'd be lucky to get out of the group. Obviously, Barcelona is going to win, theoretically going to win the group. It's really a battle for second place because PSV is no slouch, and neither is Inter Milan after a pretty huge summer for them. I think they, just like you said, are not deep enough to make a real Premier League challenge because they're playing such a tough Champions League and they're going to have to rotate so much. They're not deep like a Manchester City or even a United or even an Arsenal if Arsenal were to be in the Champions League. They're not just as deep with talent. Their starting 11 is very strong, especially going forward. But even their defense is strong. They've got a really strong 11. They're doing what Potts wants. They've got a very respectable squad, but it's not super deep with talent that can actually make a difference.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, and one major injury could really kind of screw up their season, because they don't really have much, if a Harry Kane goes down, what do they do? Or if Eriksen goes down, what do they do? Even for Arsenal, you could say if Ozil goes down, well, you bring in a Mkhitaryan or you push Ramsey higher up the pitch. I think a lot of the big clubs have that depth. So I think, it'll be between Tottenham, Chelsea, and Arsenal for those last 2 Champions League spots. I will say it's not good that we're already 6 points behind Chelsea. You just don't want them getting any distance. But, we've also played some tough games. You mentioned Wolves, and I think that they've been pretty decent to start the season. 1 win, 2 draws, and those are some pretty decent teams that they played. I think they at least have a clear identity of how they play, which I can appreciate. They pass the ball around. They have a fun midfield with Neves and Moutinho. They have Traore on the wings. They at least have a very clear identity, and I think they don't look awed by the Premier League. But their business was smart this summer, I think, and I would say the same for Fulham. Like they bought Sari, they bought Mitrovic. They brought in other pretty good players as well, and they've really settled into the Premier League. And there's one team that also did a lot of business this summer that has been a disaster thus far, and that's West Ham. And I maybe at the time when West Ham bought guys like Felipe Anderson, who to his credit's been pretty good so far, but they put Wilshere in the midfield with Mark Noble, and now they're surprised that it doesn't work. Who's kind of been maybe your biggest surprise and maybe biggest disappointment on the table?
Honestly, West Ham has been my biggest disappointment. I was really expecting more from them. I don't know. I can't even really define a reason after their summer business, after who they are. I mean, West Ham is a perennial struggler, but you generally don't think of West Ham to struggle like this. I mean, they started off the season versus Liverpool, which is a hot firing team. Okay, you go lose to Bournemouth, but at home, of course, Arsenal beat them. And then you lose to Wolves. So they've had a kind of a tough, instead other than Bournemouth, they've had a kind of a tough start to the season. I expect them to turn it around a little bit. And then my biggest surprise is got to either go to Watford being at third place or Bournemouth. Bournemouth in 6 with 2 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss. Again, not a very difficult start to their season as well. I know you mentioned it just a second ago, already starting 6 points adrift from the top. We're 4 games in. There's a lot to go. I'm not taking so much into that. You can win I'm not saying we're going to win, but you can win a Premier League with, 5 or 6 losses and it'd be fine. Yeah, you don't want them in your first 4 games, obviously, but there's a lot of football to be played, so I think we'll recover well. But yeah, biggest disappointment, West Ham for not taking any points from the first 4 games, and biggest surprise, Watford and Bournemouth being so high up the table.
Yeah, I think for me, yeah, I'd say biggest surprise probably Watford. Biggest disappointment. Yeah, West Ham's had a tough open to the season, but they just look so flat. There's just not. I don't know what it is their style of play is, but I do think they'll probably turn it around. I think they've got enough good players with Anderson and Arnautovic and guys like that. I mean, I do still feel pretty good about the teams I picked to get relegated. I think I said Cardiff, Huddersfield, and Brighton, if I'm not mistaken. I think Burnley will probably turn it around as well now that they're out of the Europa League and they don't have to worry about that. It seemed like that was more of a burden rather than a benefit to them. But it'll be interesting to see, once we get back from the international break, kind of how things go with Arsenal's lineup. Just quickly while we're wrapping up, let's get a prediction on Arsenal Newcastle, the first game after the break, and then also Tottenham Liverpool as the big game of that weekend.
I haven't seen anything from Newcastle to make me think that they're going to be anything that will make us worry. I hate to get too confident when I'm referring to Arsenal playing, because it's, typical Arsenal to lose the game we should win. Typical Spurs is to win a game against a big team and then lose against a small team. Even furthermore with Arsenal, even when we were in the Champions League, you see us bash somebody in the Champions League and then lose to Burnley or something. It's typical Arsenal to play down to a team like Newcastle. Predictable result, I'd want to go for 3-0. I'm not seeing Newcastle score a ton of goals, and I don't really think their attackers can really hold up with our defense, even what our defense is. I just don't think they're deep enough. I think it will be a tough game just with its location, but aside from that, I don't really expect them to challenge us very much. And when it comes to Liverpool-Tottenham, I think Liverpool smash them. And that's not just saying that because I disdain Tottenham, but I think Liverpool is too good of a team, too deep in the attack, too fast. Klopp's got them firing on all cylinders. I don't know. I just think it's too much to ask from Tottenham to really put in a performance that could challenge Liverpool. Maybe it'll be a good game. It is the game of the weekend, but I don't know. I think Liverpool run away probably 3-1. No, I'm gonna go 4-1. Actually, I think they'll score 4.
All right, that's a bold one. I will for Arsenal Newcastle. I think we probably give away a sloppy goal, but I think we win 2-1. And then Tottenham Liverpool. Yeah, I'm thinking probably 3-1 Liverpool. Just my last note before we wrap up: Liverpool's upcoming schedule, if you have not seen it, is really, really difficult. So they've got Tottenham, PSG, Southampton, Chelsea in the League Cup, Chelsea in the league, Napoli, Man City. That's their next 7 games. I mean, that's as hard as it gets. So, I mean, their squad strength is going to be tested quite a bit, but, we'll certainly see how all that unfolds. But I know we're going to wrap it up now.
The good news is we play them kind of after all of that. I actually, when you said that, had to look it up. Spurs, Southampton, and this is just Premier League. Spurs, Southampton, Liverpool, City, Huddersfield, Cardiff. They get 2 off games, really, and then they play us at home, at our home. So, I mean,
Maybe. I mean, it may be a very, very drained team. I don't want to say hopefully injured, but maybe a little bit banged up after playing PSG, after playing Napoli on the road. Napoli and the Serie A is known for being, kind of a rough league. Before they come into us, I mean, it's Napoli away, City at home, Huddersfield, Red Star Belgrade at home, Cardiff, and then Red Star again. So, I mean, I don't know. It's going to be a rough couple of games for them. So, I mean, maybe we'll catch them at the right time. I know I said that versus Manchester City, but maybe we will be catching them when they're a little bit out of balance from such a rough run of games.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely going to test Klopp. If they come out of that and drop a couple games, who knows what that does to their confidence, but certainly we'll see how that unfolds. But I wanted to thank you, Zach, for joining me. And, obviously if the folks want to find you on Twitter, Zach's Twitter handle is Mr. Prez X11. XII. Sorry, I'm reading it.
Anybody's wondering out there, I'm a huge history buff, and the 12th president of the United States has the exact same name as me. That's where it come from. So all my teammates growing up always called me Prez or Presidente when I was in Mexico. So that's where that comes from. Mr. Prez, XII, just stands for 12th president. I'd love to hear anybody out there's critiques on our podcast tonight. But yeah, Alex, thanks for having me on again. It's an absolute pleasure.
No, I'm glad you could join me. And of course, you can find me at UFGoonerAJ. I can find the podcast at Eurosnob Pod, and then also on Facebook, facebook.com/EurosnobPod. Subscribe on iTunes, drop a review, unless it's not 5 stars, in which case don't. But yeah, hopefully we'll get back to a little bit more regular schedule now that the season's in gear and not as many breaks coming up. But certainly we'll have Zach on real soon and hopefully catch up after a couple Arsenal wins. But until then, thanks everyone for listening.